Mr. Secretary General, world leaders, and distinguished delegates, and to all people everywhere in the world, it is a profound honor to stand before you as a representative of the American people. As millions of our citizens continue to suffer the effects of the devastating hurricanes that have struck our country, I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to every leader in this room who has offered assistance and aid. There has never been a time in history, as there is today, when the political leaders of the world, of all the nations on earth, have had the ability to come together and communicate with each other in ways that can help the people of the world in their time of desperate need. These natural disasters affect us all equally. A hurricane does not discriminate between our nations. Neither a hurricane nor an earthquake pays any attention to the imaginary lines that we have placed between us, which separate us into nations. Natural disasters do not pay any attention to the color of our skin, nor do they take note of our sexual orientation. A natural disaster is a world disaster that affects all the lives of every person upon earth equally. America and many of the islands of the Caribbean are being attacked by natural disasters. These disasters have become our mutual enemy, an enemy of all people. By setting aside our political differences and looking beyond the division and sovereign isolation of our individual nations, we are able to unite and fight these natural enemies together. We do not fight them just as Americans, not as North Koreans, not as Iranians, not as Syrians, not as Afghans, but we fight them as united human beings living together on planet Earth. We are all equal human beings. The earth belongs to all of us. And if anything upon earth rises up against us, whether it be in the form of a hurricane, an earthquake, or any other natural disaster, as the leaders of the human race, we have a solemn obligation to unite together and help each other repair the devastation that occurs from experiencing these types of natural wars against humanity. And if we can fight together against natural forms of war that are waged against us, then we can also unite together to fight the man-made wars that create misery for our citizens throughout the earth. With the same vigor and unification that we demonstrate in fighting natural disasters, we can fight poverty and inequality in our world. The people depend upon us. They have entrusted us with their power to act for them and on their behalf. Therefore, consistent with their trust, we must come together and use the resources of the earth that our governments control to ensure that every human being affected by any natural disaster or by those made by man anywhere in the world has immediate access to our aid. Let us make sure that every person thus affected by these disasters has immediate access to healthy food and water, safe and secure housing, basic clothing, and access to the best health and mental care that our world can possibly provide for them. This is the United Nations. It is not the sovereign nations. We are the United Nations of planet Earth. This body of government representatives was established after World War II, after one of Earth's sovereign nations took up arms against other human beings in an effort to subject other people to that nation's will. The United States of America rose up and disregarded its own isolation and sovereignty in order to come to the aid of the people of Europe. America's involvement in ending World War II is undeniable. But we did not help end World War II by remaining isolated behind arrogance and national pride. We saw those suffering during World War II as our fellow human beings. We joined with our fellow humans and came together to fight and end a political regime that had no respect for the right of the rest of the people of Earth to live in peace and according to the dictates and desires of their own conscience and happiness. We have recently seen what isolation and absolute sovereignty does to a group of Earth's inhabitants that has designated itself as a nation. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which we refer to as North Korea, has stood up against the rest of the world and demanded that it be respected in its rights to do what every other nation upon earth does: maintain and protect its sovereignty. As a representative of the American people, we want the world to know that we do not hate the people of North Korea. We want North Korea to know that we do respect their international rights. We are not hypocrites. The United States has become the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, not through isolation, but from opening up our borders to the rest of the world and providing a place on earth where people can come from anywhere and share with us this great nation. Our nation was created by immigration. Our nation was created consistent to what the symbol of American freedom, the Statue of Liberty, proclaims. Quote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Unquote. Yes, our nation, which has become one of the greatest nations that the world has ever known, is made up of our ancestors, most of whom were the tired and poor from Europe. We came from the huddled masses that were yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of the Eastern Hemisphere's teeming shores. Most of our American ancestors were homeless and tempest-tossed. That said, and maintaining the standards of liberty and freedom for which our Statue of Liberty stands, we open our golden doors to the people of North Korea. We do not want to fight you, and we will only defend ourselves and the other nations that depend upon our protection if we are threatened by you, if you attack us or them in any way. Otherwise, we want you to know that you are free to choose the form of government that best serves the dictates of your conscience and desires of happiness. The eastern shore of America is graced with the figure of a woman, whom we have named Lady Liberty, whose name is forged in the plaque that explains her presence, Mother of Exiles. If I may, let me read the full text of the Statue of Liberty's bronze plaque. Quote, "Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Unquote. Few people know the true history behind our Statue of Liberty. The statue was patterned after a great statue that once stood in ancient Greece, the Colossus of Rhodes. The Greek statue was of a male holding weapons of war, meant to make a statement of sovereign power and might, warning all other nations of the world to be careful of the conquering power of ancient Greece. Our Statue of Liberty is even more colossal, but it represents the gentleness and nourishing nature of a woman who holds in her hand not weapons of war, but a weapon of peace and liberty and justice for all, the rule of law. Ironically, it was a natural disaster, an earthquake, that destroyed the ancient Greek statue. And we, as Americans, as equal citizens of this earth, promise to do all that we can to keep any natural or man-made disaster from destroying the promise of Our Lady Statue of Liberty, the Mother of Exiles. If you are living in North Korea and you pride yourself in being a North Korean instead of an equal person that belongs to Earth's human race, and you want to maintain this isolation and national pride, if you want to keep your ancient land, your storied pomp, then you have every right to stay in North Korea and subject yourself to that form of government. However, to the people of North Korea, we, the American people, have an important message. If you find yourself living in slavery under your respected sovereign government's rule of law, and your government is not fulfilling your personal desires of liberty and happiness, we encourage you to leave that part of planet Earth and come to ours. We invite you with open arms to do what our American ancestors did before us, leave their country and immigrate to a land of opportunity, freedom, and promise. Our land is not really our land. It is Earth's land, and it belongs to each of you too. If you come, we will ensure that you have access to nutritious food and clean water. We will help you to have basic clothes. We will help find safe and secure housing for you. We will help you with the best health and mental care that is available anywhere in the world. We will educate you so that you too will come to understand why we have become the greatest nation on earth. But if you choose to stay and support your government, we will still do everything within our power to ensure that you have that right, as we all do, to live in a nation and under the rule of law of our own choice. But if your government chooses to threaten us or any other independent nation, then we will have no other choice of action than to protect us and them and destroy that which threatens us. Before explorers discovered the shores of the Western Hemisphere, North and South America belonged to an ancient, isolated, and sovereign people. However, the Native Americans had little to no form of government outside of their simple ways of providing for their families and for their communities. They had no form of government that controlled the basic necessities of life that the earth, in its natural abundance, should offer to all human beings equally and freely. As modern Americans, we are not proud of what some of our ancestors did to the Native American people. And joining us in our humility, most assuredly, are the modern German people who are not proud of what some of their ancestors did to the people of Europe during World War II. There are other nations upon earth that we as Americans have not respected in the past. Uninformed American leaders have bred fear in our hearts and have deemed these nations a threat to our national security, as well as the security of other independent nations. Hypocritically, we have not given due relevance to these nations' sovereign existence. We have made enemies of the people of Syria, of Iran, and Afghanistan, to name just a few. Unfortunately, the freedoms that we allow our press, the media, coupled with the distorted, un-American views of some of our politicians, has alienated us from these other countries. Our former foreign policies have created the implied threat. They have caused us to hate them, and them to hate us. Like us, like the people of North Korea, these nations simply want to exist without being threatened by us or by our allies. What we, the American people, have offered to the North Koreans, we offer to the rest of the world. We will leave you alone to your own form of government and will not intervene unless your form of government threatens our allies or us. But we will leave our doors open to you. We will leave our doors open to you. We will use our strong military might, not to threaten your sovereignty, but to provide a safe and secure passage for our fellow humans to leave their nation and become part of ours. People of the world, if you are not satisfied with your government and you are powerless to change it, then the land of promise that we call the United States of America welcomes you as it did our ancestors. It's this welcoming call and our open arms that will send a message to your standing governments that we believe that all human beings upon earth have equal rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If your chosen form of government does not believe in these same human rights, then we extend a hand of friendship to you, our fellow and equal human beings. We will use our extraordinary military strength and power to support your right to choose the form of government that you want to exist under and live anywhere upon earth where you so choose. We will no longer involve ourselves in your wars, in your internal conflicts and local political struggles for power and control. We will no longer support any sovereign nation in its attempt to occupy your lands and subject any of earth's people to despotism and authoritarian rule. Again, give us your tired, your poor. Give us your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Give us the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to us. We lift our lamp beside the golden door. Ladies and gentlemen, gathered today together here as the United Nations, you who are the leaders of the nations of planet Earth, consider what we are offering your citizens. We are proclaiming that we will no longer intervene in your domestic affairs. Whatever form of government you wish to establish, we will protect your sovereignty and right to choose your chosen rule of law. But we, the American people, offer the people of this world an alternative to the nations and governments that separate us and divide us. This body of representatives is not called the sovereign nations. It is called the United Nations. From our own experience as Americans, we have witnessed how a divided people, yes, divided into separate states as our Constitution allows, disempowers government authority and causes civil war and domestic problems. More Americans died during the American Civil War than in all other wars combined. This war was about division. It was about the rights of states to maintain their sovereignty and independence. We have never been the United States. We are the divided states of America. This division can be seen throughout Washington, D.C., throughout the halls of the U.S. Congress, in the White House, and in the chambers of our Supreme Court. We are not a united people. Our government does not, it cannot work properly because of this division. Our continued division into separate, ununited states is the cause of our government's failure to operate efficiently and effectively on behalf of the people who elected us and entrusted us with their power and authority. So, it is a very difficult task that I have to stand before this body of world leaders and pretend that everything about America is great. Everything about America is not great. America has its own problems, which are many. Our nation is far from the nation that the American people want to believe that it is, what we have pretended that it is. It is easy for us to extol and brag about our economy and how well the United States has done since the last election. It is easy for us to pat ourselves on the back because the American stock market is at an all-time high, a record. It is easy to point out that unemployment is at its lowest level in 16 years, and because of our regulatory and other reforms, we have more people working in the United States today than ever before. We can be proud that companies are moving back to the United States, creating job growth, the likes of which our country has not seen in a very long time. But it is not easy to reveal the reality of our economic prosperity. It is not easy for us to admit that the stock market is a barometer of how well the 1% of our population is doing, the wealthy who benefit the most from the stock market, earning money without being forced to work for it. It is not easy to face our youth who are in enormous debt from their college education, an education that politicians promised would allow them employment opportunities of their own choice. It is not easy to face our youth and tell them that the jobs that the American economy is creating are jobs that they do not want to do, jobs that have little to nothing to do with the reason and the debt for which they attended college. It is not easy for us to admit that our corporations are simply modern plantations of slavery, where the rich need laborers to maintain their wealth and worldly success. It is not easy for us to admit that opioid addiction, both legal and illegal, has swept our country and is killing more Americans than at any other time in our history. It is not easy for us to admit why Americans are becoming addicted to opioids. It is not easy for us to admit that Americans have lost hope in their government, that they have lost hope in the American dream, which promises them life, liberty, and the pursuit of individual happiness. Our youth are recognizing that 1% of Americans, only 3 million people, control their own lives, that only 3 million Americans have the means to live life and pursue individual happiness without being forced to work for another person. Without the paychecks that the 99% receive from the 1%, the 99% could not exist in the world. There are many things about the United States of America that our media does not report to the rest of the world. America is not the nation that it once was. But America is still the greatest nation upon earth. And if the greatest nation on earth continues to fail the majority of its people, then what does this say about the rest of the nations upon earth? We live in a time of extraordinary opportunity, but this opportunity is not equally available to all people. Breakthroughs in science, technology, and medicine are curing illnesses and solving problems that prior generations thought impossible to solve. But these extraordinary human innovations and discoveries are not affordable to most people. Each day brings news of growing dangers that threaten everything we cherish and value. We call some of our fellow humans terrorists and extremists. These groups of people have gathered strength and spread to every region of the planet. But why? What caused this? Has the United Nations ever considered the underlying reasons why terrorism and extremists exist? Why do the youth of this world feel that it is necessary to join these terrorist and extremist groups? If the United Nations, this body of the world's representatives, were honest with each other, you as the leaders of this world would agree that terrorism and extremism is a product of poverty and inequality. Yes, when a person feels unequal to another, that person must find value wherever it is available. The religions of the world offer this value to a human being. Is it not true that most of the wars and bloodshed throughout the history of the world were and are a cause of religious division? If our religious beliefs, which so adversely divide us, were united under the cause for which all religions ostensibly stand, the elimination of poverty and inequality, this united effort would change the world. When a youth is taught that the God of this earth sees all people as equal human beings, wouldn't that youth support a religion that bases its foundation on these basic humane principles of human equality? But when a religion teaches the youth that they are special above all other people, this type of God and religion is discriminatory, prejudiced, and racist. Would not this affect the way that the youth view other people? As leaders, we must take a hard look at our religions and what they mean and how they are affecting our youth, who become adults and learn hate, prejudice, and racism. We must make an effort to unite our people under the purpose for which true religion, undefiled before earth's God, should exist, to care for the poor and the needy in their affliction. If we solve poverty and inequality, we can greatly reduce the recruiting efforts of terrorist and extremist groups. Only if we can provide the youth of our world with an alternative to these groups can we defeat them without continued bloodshed and terror. We are greatly concerned with authoritarian powers that seek to collapse the values, the systems, and the alliances that can prevent violence and conflict and tilt the world towards peace and freedom. We must be aware and confront international criminal networks that traffic drugs, weapons, people, that force dislocation and mass migration, anyone and anything that threatens our world. But we must first confront the underlying causes of why these things exist: poverty and inequality. We live upon earth during a time of both immense promise and great peril. It is entirely up to us whether we lift the world to new heights or let it fall into a valley of disrepair. We have it in our power, should we so choose, to lift millions from poverty, to help our citizens realize their dreams, and to ensure that new generations of children are raised free from violence, hatred, and fear. But shall we continue to do what has never worked? Shall we continue to use military force and might to conquer and occupy nations in our pursuit of peace and freedom? That's like punishing a child by slapping the child for hitting another child. The child is not taught how to peacefully get along with the other children, to respect the other child and let the other child play as that child wishes. We do not teach our children to walk away from conflict and aggression. We are teaching our children to be aggressive. Our children are being taught by examples of force. They are taught that harming another human being is justified as proper punishment. We must learn to turn our swords into plowshares. This general religious term is widely used but has never been implemented or tried. We must use our military might and the technology that gives our militaries the power that they have to end poverty and inequality throughout the world. This can only be done if the governments of this world unite and cooperate together, sharing the natural resources of the earth for the sake of all of Earth's inhabitants. Has the premise and foundation of the United Nations worked for us? Has our world become a safer place since the United Nations was first established after World War II? It has not. This institution was founded in the aftermath of 2 world wars to help shape a better future for everyone on Earth. It was based on the vision that diverse nations could cooperate to protect their sovereignty, preserve their security, and promote their prosperity. It was built on the noble idea that the whole world is safer when nations are strong, independent, and free. Is it not true that the leaders gathered today as the United Nations believe that the success of the United Nations depends upon the independent strength of its members? If this is the course and underlying premise of the United Nations, and it doesn't work, and it has not worked, and there is no reason to believe that it will ever work in the future, then we must change the course and premise of the existing United Nations. To overcome the perils of the present and to achieve the promise of the future, we must begin with the wisdom of the past. We must wisely and humbly admit that the United Nations does not work as it is. It is not doing what it was meant to do. Where we have believed in the past that our success depends on a coalition of strong and independent nations that embrace their sovereignty to promote security, prosperity, and peace for themselves and for the world, we must consider the lack of success that strong and independent nations have had. We must realize that we are not united nations. We are divided nations. We cannot continue to deceive ourselves with our own pomp and pride. As we meet in these opulent and beautiful chambers as representatives of our different nations, of our people, are we considering the plight and daily circumstance of our own citizens? What are the members of this body of political leaders doing for their own citizens? Are we not meeting together, not as sovereign nations, but as united nations? How united are we really? Should we not take a look at actually becoming united, one people of one planet? Should we not look to establish a government not for Americans, Chinese, or Russians, not for Israelis or Palestinians, not for the French or for Germans or Iranians or Iraqis, but for equal human beings? Is it not our sovereignty that has divided us and is destroying us? It is time for a one-world government, a new world constitution based on the support and protection of all human beings equally. A constitution that establishes the rights of the people and limits the government power and strength to only supporting and protecting the rights of the people. Shouldn't this be the beautiful vision of this great institution? Isn't this the only way for the foundation of cooperation and success? Strong, sovereign nations have never worked. We want to believe that sovereignty is good, that it lets diverse countries with different values, different cultures, and different dreams not just coexist, but work side by side on the basis of mutual respect. We want to believe that strong, sovereign nations let their people take ownership of the future and control their own destiny. We want to believe that strong, sovereign nations allow individuals to flourish in the fullness of life. Although we want to believe that the nations of this world can and will work together while maintaining their sovereign and independence of each other by defending the imaginary lines that we have drawn across the earth that we call our national borders, although we want to believe these things, we must finally admit our failures. We must move into the future with a different resolve. We must become one world, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and may who or whatever God there might be bless the people of planet Earth.
When we stand together, there is no limit to what we can achieve. 3 days ago, young people from many nations stood together in balcony of this hall. They asked for one thing above all: change. Change. We must do everything we can to close the gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be. That is the mission of the United Nations.